It was inappropriate. Welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. March Madness continues. Hopefully, if your bracket's not in shambles, I don't know if I can trust you.
Yeah, I didn't fill one out, so mine is just as good as it was yesterday.
There you go. Anybody whose bracket is intact, they're a crazy person because they would have picked everything that happened last night, and nobody in their right mind would have picked the things that have happened last night. Maybe we'll talk about St. Peter's here in a second. I read to you a story about the Asian Great Gatsby. We're going to talk about that really fascinating story about an Asian financier who is paying Leonardo Dicaprio to be his friend. There's more to the story than that, but that's kind of the elevator pitch to get your attention. Thinking out loud, I think there's a couple of stuff. You said what's going on in the world. I said it's Ukraine and Russia. Maybe we'll think out loud about a couple of things maybe that we've noticed. And what is time? You've got an update for us on the daylight savings time.
We have a daylight savings update.
And then I have this big thing with my friends. They make fun of me because to me, time is but a construct. And I get made fun of for this. I know.
Is that the title of your thesis? Time is but a construct?
It might be like my autobiography, to be completely honest, for anybody who knows me. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll think out loud about that as well. Before we get to all of that, Mark, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling constructed. I will say of all rational, intelligent people, you are as little affected by time as anyone I've ever met.
Do you want to start with it?
No, I mean, but there are you don't show up for games late. You don't show up when tip off is at 6. You don't roll in at 6:20 and just be like, yeah, whatever. So there are times in your life you are actually punctual.
But it is funny though, because I think some people, if their game's at 6, they've got to be there by 4:50.
You've got to be there by 6.
And I'm the person that's it's 5:30. I'll fill out the book. I'll sit down, and I don't know. I've watched so many people in their lives, and when I look at what is the thing that stresses them out, what is the thing that just makes them grumpy or makes them, I really feel they don't feel like they have control of time, their time, the world's time, their schedule, other people's schedule. I feel like the people who really are it's this constant grasp at time. And so I have sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. But I have just tried to develop this mindset of just time. Someone made up time. Time, nobody, a clock did not fall from the sky. And it was just someone like you or I sat down and said hey, we should have this thing.
There's a pattern to this. Let's figure it out.
I'm just saying.
By the way, I'm having a muscle spasm right here in my.
You're losing it.
I guess it would be.
Can you do the full circle?
It's not my bicep and it's not my lat, it's whatever that is, right? It's right in the front of my shoulder. What would that muscle be?
Is this the first sign of a stroke or a heart attack?
No, it's just haven't you ever had a spasm? No, you're not.
I've had spasms, but not in. Isn't it is it your left or your right? That would be your right.
It doesn't hurt. I'm not having a pain.
Okay.
My muscle is just twitching, and
I'm not trying to make light of it. Isn't the first sign of a stroke something to do with
your left arm? It's a heart attack. If you have a pain in your, because people, unless you knew, if you're feeling a pain in your arm, you wouldn't think why it's not my heart. My heart's way over here. But yes, that is the first sign. But no, I'm not having a heart attack. I'm just having a muscle spasm.
So you disagree that time isn't real? It's I understand it's like money. We've all agreed we're not going to kill each other because we're going to pay for food and money is this fiat thing. But I'm just saying at some point we had to make the same agreement about time. We all had to agree that
no. And I'm more fascinated by the statement that you made about, is it the one thing that causes people the most stress? And as you flip it into money, I had this conversation with a very intelligent person. And this is one of the more shocking things I've ever heard from an intelligent adult. But we were talking about the Paris Accord and, we need to take care of the environment because this, and they were talking about the financial side because this was right after Trump pulled out of it.
Yeah.
And I was there's other aspects of politics and life that don't have to do with a financial spreadsheet and the air we breathe and the water we drink or whatever. And this very intelligent adult who's older than me said, well, what good is it breathing if you don't have any money? And I was like, what? that's really your mindset.
Sure.
Like, if you can't have a lot of money, you might as well just be dead.
Well,
But so that's
that's
in his world, money causes stress because
Sure.
obviously money's more important than air. But it is interesting if you took 100 people surveyed, top 7 answers on the board. What causes people the most stress? Time is not one that I would have generally thought about.
Okay.
But I think you're right. It's one of the candidates. There's no doubt about it.
I think there's things, and don't get me wrong, money is important. Time is important. Like, I'm not saying these things aren't in the world that we have constructed. I'm not saying that they aren't important. I'm just saying, like, sometimes when I sit down and think about this stuff, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying this is how my brain works. I'll ask myself, like, are these things concrete? Like, are they actually like really concrete? Or are these constructs that we've just kind of set up for ourselves and we've made them? And I think money and time are two of those things where, like, yes, they're important. Yes, they help society run. Clearly, there are staples within our culture that you have to follow in order to, like, succeed or to live a happy life. However, like, I just don't let the minuscule stuff about it bother me. I don't fret over the minor financial decisions. I don't fret over the minor time of, like, being 5 minutes early or 5 minutes late. Like, I just don't. I think people that let those things, like, really get to them are the most stressed out people I know.
Well, listen, I'm not a fretter either. And I will actually tell the people around me, like, we're not worrying about this today.
Sure.
Like, this is coming up in 10 days. There's 2 minutes to go in the game. We'll talk about it later. But no, I am with you from the.
And I'll be the first to tell you, and like, you've been around me enough to know, like, it gets me in trouble sometimes. Like, I'm not sitting here implying everybody.
Well, yeah, there's pros and cons to everything.
Yes.
And I don't.
Like, I'm
don't
very aware that I have some cons with that mindset.
Well, I'll tell you one of the things that has really hit me in the last whatever, now that we've had COVID and the working from home. And
I thought you were going to say because you're 50 now. That's what I thought you were.
No. But because I've dealt with the thing, there's that aspect where, like, you're supposed to be to work at this time, you're supposed to be to the office at this time, and it's shocking, especially in real estate and stuff, how much work I can do, because you kind of have either your written list or your mental list. Mm-hmm. These are the things. I've got to text this person, I've got to email this person, I've got to do this. Sure. It is shocking how much you can do before my feet even hit the floor. Sure. I'm still laying in bed. I don't even have my glasses on yet. I haven't even stood up yet.
Sure.
And then there was this old school, like, your parents came from a generation, like, you got to get up and get to work. And now you're like, well, I can either do the work here, I can do it at the kitchen table, I can do it at the office. What's it matter? Do I get bonus points if I do it from the office?
Sure.
Or why don't I just do it? And if I do it from here, now it's done and over with, and I did it an hour earlier.
Can I tell people about the TikTok video I sent you last night? Did you watch that, about how Mark Cuban views employees now? Did you click on that? It's okay.
You sent me multiple things, and I saw some of them. Okay. What else did you send me?
One of the videos that I sent you was a Mark Cuban interview.
Okay.
And for people who don't, Mark Cuban's a business tycoon.
He's on Shark Tank. That's where people know.
So he has, hundreds, if not thousands, of employees that work for him. And he says one of the biggest changes that he has had to make is he now views his employees as free agents. So when he first started out, there was this idea that, like, I didn't have to be as nice. I could kind of look as people as, like, you are fortunate to be here, and I'm going to treat you as such. And he says in the last year or two, I've had to completely flip that mindset to these are free agents. And I'm fortunate I have them when I look out into the business landscape, because everybody's hiring and everybody's looking for workers and everything else. So part of what you said, like, his whole mindset about remote work has completely flipped. Like, if you can do your stuff at home, great. Like, do that. I'm happy you're happy, and I'm happy you're getting your stuff done. So kind of going along with the point you're making, I think, like, business tycoons and upper people have started to develop the same mindset as well. That, like, there isn't this white button-up shirt, tie mentality, and if I can't see you doing it, then you're not, if you're not there at punching your clock at 7:45. And Cuban's like, yeah, he's like, I've completely flipped in the last 2 years.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I talked to a buddy of mine from college last night who is the most successful of my college buddies, most professionally successful. He is a tax accountant with he's made huge money in these New York City firms. And I don't even know what firm he works for now and what but we were talking about his job and how is it, and that's stressful. And well, are you still remote or whatever? He goes 4 days a week. Okay. He has said, I go into the office 1 day a week. He said now they're starting to say they want us back in the office 3 days a week. Okay. And when you're in like New York City, his commute's probably an hour. Okay. It might even be more. So, and you're taking a bus to a train or a car to a train or whatever. And I said, how much do you need to be there? And he goes, what's funny? He said, people, they're polling the employees and all the different factions of the company. Mm-hmm. And the general consensus is 1 day a week is plenty. Okay. You can see the people, because it's not like you can't communicate from home.
Outside of it, right.
But to be in the same space with the people 1 a week. And he said to me, probably if it's not 1, it's like 1.5. And you may
days a week, you mean?
Yes. Okay. He goes, there may be that little extra that I needed to see him, but he was in a meeting, or I needed to talk to her and she wasn't, or whatever. But he said nobody's coming in for a half day. Okay. So, but he's like, this is the world of you had to be in the office 5 days a week, and you had to do this and you had to do that. And now he's like, we generally think 1 is all we need to be here.
Yeah.
And you wonder how much more efficient, because the technology is everywhere. Yeah. How much more efficient you are, that you're not wasting 2 hours in commute.
Sure. So I have a family member that I've told you about. She works for a larger company, and she did HR. She was like bigwig in HR. Now she's moved into like company culture aspects of stuff. But I was talking to her, because they have these huge office buildings, and they have these leases that are 5, 10
that they're stuck with,
and like you have them. And so I said, she goes, we're coming back in. And, I said, how often are they coming in? Like once a week. She goes, we're trying to get them to come in 2 or 3 times a week. And I said, how much of that is about the lease and how much of it? And she goes, well, yes, we have the buildings, but she goes, what we've noticed, especially because we're like a factory setting, like we actually have things that we are producing and packaging and shipping out. She goes, we've noticed that 1 day just isn't enough. Like it doesn't need to be 100% of your work week, but it needs to be the majority of your work week, whether that's 55 or 60%. So I do wonder how many companies, like you said, they polled and said, is 1 day enough? I do wonder how many of these companies are saying, like, what is the maximum amount that we actually need to be in person that works for us? And that may be 1 day, it may be 4 days, but somewhere in the middle. I don't think the 5 day week is, unless it's like a school system or something. Like I think for a lot of these companies, like the 5 day week just isn't. Now here's the flip side of that. And I know I'm rambling. The flip side of that is talking to people in the family that work for the same company. They said they have never worked more in their life than they have in the last 2 years, because you're kind of always working. So
because when you work from home, you can't get away from it.
Yes. And so there's this idea of like, you can work from a laptop in bed, or you can travel and go on a vacation and work from the hotel room and stuff like that. But there is this idea that like there used to be this finite 5 days, like 8 to 4, and you were out. And they said there's a lot of times now where like it's a Saturday and like my laptop's open, or like it's 7 o'clock and like I'm taking somebody's call because I can now, and that. So I do the benefits and the up and down. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out for the next year or two.
Spasm's back.
It's there. It's just, I think it's bothering you more than you're leading on to.
No, it's just weird. Haven't you ever? I tell you what, I used to get them in my eyelid.
It's probably
like where my eyebrow is.
It's probably because of daylight saving time. Tell us about that.
It might be. So here's here's my daylight saving story. Hold on, now now it's gone. I was going to say something else about the commute. Oh, I think too. This is my last stupid point. Depending on how people are wired, if you are like structured and you have to get to the office, you have to have your coffee, you have to do this, and there's some people that the flexibility and the non-consistency would drive them insane. But I think there's other people that the monotony just drives them insane. And the fact that today they can work from home, or today they can do this, or they can go somewhere else, like you said, all they have to do is take their laptop. They can go somewhere. They can work from the hotel in the morning before they check out. And so some people are pushed by the variety, and some people just can't handle it.
They get bogged down. You know what the funniest one? I have two friends that are married, and there was a moment in time where they both worked remotely. and they said it was a nightmare.
I can imagine.
They said it doesn't work. They're like, we just can't. They're like, we can cohabitate. We're fine together. Like, we can live together, all stuff. But the moment you threw us both into a remote work situation, like, nightmare. Like, they just could not work around the other.
No, I agree. And I've had people who, especially in a business like real estate where you can go, and I've had people who like, no, I need an office because I need to get out of my house because you can't get in that work mode if you're in your house.
Okay.
Or some people can't.
Sure.
So anyway, okay, daylight savings time. I did not know this when we talked about it the other day. It passed the Senate, did it? So now it's got to get through the House for it to have a chance.
It needs to go through the House, and it needs a Biden signature, are the last two phases.
So it's been tried before. In the 70s, they tried it.
Okay.
And in, I think, World War II.
Okay.
And it was the issue. Now, I think they did it in January, I want to say, in the 70s. The issue is, as we talked about, it will keep it lighter later, but it will be darker longer in the morning.
Sure.
And again, just to remind people, and I know people understand this, we're not creating more hours that the sun's up.
Sure.
We're just adjusting what time, because the sun doesn't care about the clock, as you've just said.
Yes.
So the issue was kids walking to school in the dark, and more kids were getting hit by cars because they were walking to school in the dark.
This was in the 70s?
In the 70s.
Interesting.
And when you think of how many schools start before 8 o'clock anyway, and now, what time do buses show up?
So here's my devil's advocate to that. I would guess less kids walk to school today than ever before in the history of America.
But do they walk to bus stops? Are they standing at bus stops?
I'm not saying there aren't some.
But I get what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, mathematically, there has to be less walkers to school or to the bus stop than ever in the history.
I would agree with that.
So I wonder if that even matters now.
But that was part of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that.
And apparently, they said they tried it. Once they did it, within weeks, the complaints were, we need to go back.
But see, I think that's going to happen regardless. Like,
I think complain.
If we did it right now, I think you're going to have an initial amount of complaints, and then I think 5.5 months from now, when we should reset the clock, I think you're going to be flooded, like inundated with complaints. I think you're going to get complaints no matter what. Maybe. I would not let them deter it from trying to, like, I would just say go through a cycle, like get through a year and a half, and then field complaints. Then, like, sit down and evaluate and say, because you're going to get complaints.
Because every time there's change, people complain.
Absolutely.
Amen. Now, we have another alternative, which I never thought of till today. We could just go to the Jeff clock where there is no clock.
There is no clock.
And we can just, whatever.
This is, like, you laugh. Here's an example. Like, I understand there are certain things that need a clock, right? Like,
because they need a start time.
Events and things. I totally get that. However, between phones and text messaging and just everything else, like, I don't, like, when I was, like, we talked about this before. When we were a kid, it was like you had to be at the playground at 12 because that's where everyone congregated. And if you weren't there by 12, you were lost for the day. You were just biking around trying to figure out where everybody went. And all I'm saying is, like, that's not real now. Like, if you want, it doesn't matter what time it is. There's so many times in the social aspect of life, it does not matter what time it is.
I'm with you.
Okay. Now, in the organized world of life, yes. Like, I totally get it. Like, events need time.
Except, like, last call, for example.
But I mean, that's kind of, you can pick and choose that. So, I don't know. Was there another one for World War II?
I don't remember what happened, why they did it during World War. My guess during World War II was for energy purposes.
Maybe.
But I didn't really read into that. But that was the issue of the 70s, and it really didn't last long. Like, it didn't last a year. Sure. They were like, okay, nobody likes this, everyone's complaining. But I totally agree with your sentiment. Whatever they do, because the people who complain, the loudest people are the complainers. The people who agree never go to the hilltops and scream, I love this.
Well, we deal with that here.
All the time.
We joke off, like, I think we're up to like 65,000 followers, and like we'll get an email or two a day of, a complaint or something like that. and we'll have 0 emails of like,
you're doing a
great job today. But I always laugh and say, essentially, like the 60,000 people that have never sent anything, I would argue that's the pat on the back.
That is a silent pat on the back. Yes, that is an affirmation.
So yes, the complainers are going to be the loudest. When they tried this, did they already? This would be my question. When they did this, was it we jumped forward and then they did it? Because I can see people being upset if it was like December and they jumped forward out of system, and now it's like a shock to the system. So I'm curious if that's what they did in the 70s.
That is a good question.
40s.
I would assume that's what they did, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, people just like to complain.
I think the way they're going about this is the right way. Like, they waited until the clocks moved forward.
And then they would just leave it.
Then they introduced it, and they passed it. And now we get 6 months to just, like, this is how it's going to be. Yep. And now we just have to get past the 6 months and not reset the clocks. So I'm curious if that's how they did it the previous 2 times.
I don't think, because like I said, and I read this once, and I didn't. I thought it happened in January, so it would appear that they rolled it in the fall and then made it and then fixed it in January.
Heather brings up a great point. Time totally matters to those of us that want to stop working for the day. Very valid point.
Well, there is, like, the people who punch a time clock, but you're right, because of technology and because of working remotely and depending on what your job is, so many people just take their job home with them. And if you want to leave, if you got to leave at 4, you just take your, yesterday I was sending work texts from the parking lot.
Sure.
Because I got there, I had a text on my walk from here to the car. And then I was like, well, I can either drive home and do it. I just do it now.
Yeah. Some of that, Heather, is, I'm trying to think how I want to say this. And not necessarily to be like politically correct, but I want to make sure that
because you are the king of political correct.
I'm far from it, but I don't want to come off as like a jerk. I think some of that is mindset. And so depending on the company you work for, the job you want to do, there are jobs where people like will work overtime and be happy to do it.
Right.
Like they are enthralled with their work and they're happy to be there and the work environment's great, or they're doing it with a buddy, or you know what I mean? Like it just depends what it is. There's also the aspect, though, of some of these companies, they're more now getting out of the punch the ticket into like the quota of like, I don't care how long it takes you to do this. Make sure it's done. And when it's done, you're done. And I think remote work has also helped kind of nudge that. Now, again, I understand like in the event world, in the restaurant industry, in the food industry, like I understand there are jobs where like that's not possible per se. But like, I do think some of that is even becoming more mindset of like punching the clock. I think we're moving into a world where it's like, here's a quota, or here's what has to get done, or this is, and if you do it in an hour, great. If it takes you 4, okay. But like this is, so it is interesting. I know that's not perfect for everyone.
Well, I had a job once at a medical research company. Most of my job was on the road. That was kind of like, when I came into play, when we had to go to our sites. Mm-hmm. And when I was in the office, a lot of times I didn't have a whole lot to do.
Sure.
And it sounds great to go to a job where you have like 3 things you have to get done today and you're there for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And you can send emails to everyone you ever went to school with. You can search eBay. You can read every box score. It's really, really stressful to try to look busy at a job when you know the people around you are busy and you don't have a whole lot to do.
Yeah.
And now in my mind, I kept telling them, because tomorrow I'm on a plane at 4:45. And by the time I get to my hotel and it's, I'm going to have the travel and the work site and the travel back. And like, I have my stretches where I'm working way harder than you, but right now you're working way harder than me.
Sure.
And you live in that fear of someone walking around the corner and saying, so what are you working on? And you're like, I just bid on something on eBay. And so, I think work remote has kind of helped with that because you don't have to sit in the office and be bored and pretend. You can sit at home and you can do laundry. You can be multitasking productive.
You all like, this is a sneaky thing about remote work, and we got to get off this, but I also think with remote work, it's not as big of a deal if you don't like your coworker. Like, it's just a lot. No, I'm serious, because I've talked with like friends and family about this who have like coworkers that they've said like, yeah, we kind of get along now. Like, we kind of like, because you just don't have to. You don't have to hear them sniffling. Like, you don't have to like smell their lunch they heated up. Like, there's just a lot of like factors into whether or not you can like co-work or co-live.
Is that why
with
you've been coming in late this week?
That is.
Are you getting sick of your coworker?
That is why.
God, that hurts. That you didn't even try to disguise that. You just kind of threw it right at me and pretended I wasn't going to catch it.
Ever since you turned 50, you've just been very curmudgeon-y. Like,
it happens, dude. Did I tell you the pain I got in my leg the other day?
No, all I've heard about is your shoulder today.
I was like, well, this doesn't hurt. It's just a spasm. Haven't you ever just had a random muscle spasm for no reason?
Yeah, but not in like.
Never had one here. I said, I usually get it in my right in my eyebrow.
I can't help you.
So anyway, I'm laying in bed. This is how physically active I was at the moment. Laying in bed, left leg from my knee right down my shin into my foot, like shooting pain for like 2 seconds, and then it was gone.
Rough.
And I clearly wasn't doing anything because I was laying in bed watching TV. And that is what you have to look forward to at 50.
I don't know. I'm doing okay.
Because you're not 50.
I just read you this story before, and I find this fascinating. This is the Asian Great Gatsby. If you haven't heard of this story, you can find it on a couple of different news outlets. I'm using the Vice one. There was a financier who stole $1.42 billion. So here's the basis of the story. There is a Chinese-Malaysian fugitive. The financier goes by Joe Low, Jholow. He stole $1.42 billion from a Malaysian account or bond that was being created by the people in charge of Malaysia to try to help build up industry, fund different projects within the country. And meanwhile, the entire time, there were people pulling from the fund illegally. What Lowe did is that he actually paid people to essentially be his friend, mostly Americans. So some of the examples that they give here, Lowe paid model Emily Ratajkowski, paid her in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to be his date to the Super Bowl. He helped fund the Wolf of Wall Street movie and became friends with Leonardo Dicaprio and would actually pay Leonardo DiCaprio to go to dinner with him and do different things. Not like, according to this, not events. Like, these were like personal, like, meetings essentially, where they would go like get an ice cream cone and like sit on a park bench, like just like hang out with Leonardo DiCaprio.
It's like a date,
kind of, sort of. There's other things in here too. There was some stuff with Megan Fox, different celebrities within America. Since then, he's been labeled the Asian Great Gatsby. He is currently an international fugitive that is believed to be hiding out in China. He's 40 years old, and he is known for throwing lavish parties with the stolen funds to this day. According to court testimonies last month, the paid celebrities at his most recent events include Megan Fox, Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian, and Leonardo DiCaprio again. There is also Miranda Kerr. She's an Australian actress, if you've ever heard of her. She had to hand over $8 million in jewelry that Lowe had gifted to her using these funds from this Malaysian account. So this is the Asian Great Gatsby. You and I, whenever we read these stories, it's always it's amazing this stuff happens over and over and over again.
How does he throw lavish parties while he's a fugitive and not get caught?
I don't know. Says now that he's hiding out in China. Where these lavish parties are, or where they were held,
over now?
I don't know. This seems as if it was pretty current. So for example, like as early as 2018, he was seen at the Super Bowl.
How 2000 when?
18.
Oh,
so
that's
essentially
4 years ago.
I know, but but if you take 2 years of a pandemic out of it, here's the thing. When you talk about like events in pop culture, 2018, it feels like it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Because it was 4 years
But it wasn't, because we had 2 years of nothing.
See, now we get back to, there are some places where time still matters. And 2018 was still 4 years ago.
See, in the world of pop culture, like 2000 to 2021 and a half, nothing happened. There were no movies, there were no concerts. There was nothing.
So then you're still 13. because
No.
nothing happened in the last.
You're just being a jerk, and you're completely missing the point.
It's not pop. Time has passed.
What I'm saying to you is, you said when were the most recent parties, and what I'm saying to you is, like, he may have had a lavish party in 2020 if it wasn't for the fact that everybody in the world was freaking out. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Ah.
So when I say
okay,
so
now I'm on.
like it
now
was
I'm on
4
board.
years ago, and I'm saying like, well, yeah, but like.
But
technically,
but he
in the world of lavish parties, that's really like 2 years
ago. Are
ago.
we saying, and I get that point. I was looking of the standpoint that he's been unseen for 4 years. Is that safe to say?
That's a good question. I don't know how long he's been unseen. It's a great question.
Do you know how hard it would be to hide?
Well, not if you're in like China.
But still.
If you're in a non-democracy nation, I feel like you can kind of pull it off. Like like if you're in Russia or China or North Korea or like
I get it. Like, if you have a boatload of money and you go somewhere, but don't you have to be, if you're really hiding, you have to be anonymous while you're hiding, or you have to totally change your identity. But you can't go, like, yeah, you could go to Wichita and you could get an apartment in Wichita and pay cash, and who would ever know that, you know, you're Jeff Everett in Wichita. But then as long as you don't talk to anyone, as long as you don't intermingle with anyone, or if you do, you have to lie about who you are.
I would argue that your finances matter more than your anonymity. Did I say that correctly?
Anonymity. But yes,
your anonymity. Like, I would argue having money means way more than people not knowing.
And that's how the Whitey Bulger guy hid for so long, because he had cash.
Yeah. And if you have I'll say it one last time. If you have $1.42 billion.
But he doesn't have all that because he blew some of it.
Yes, he did. So one of the stories within the story, he actually blew $1.7 million in 90 minutes. Vegas has him on film, spending the money and then ducking out. I don't know what year that was.
He just had a cold run of cards is what happened.
He was playing Baccarat.
Yeah, that's what the big people play. I don't even know the rules of Baccarat.
Okay.
I know that's the room where the peons aren't allowed to go.
Okay, yeah. $1.75 million in a single 90-minute turn at Baccarat.
Like I said,
pretty incredible.
That's a cold. I assume it's a card game, or is it a dice game? Is it like craps? But either way, it was cold. It was a cold 90 minutes.
So it's an interesting story. I'm not going to bore you with the exact details. This fund, though, this Malaysian fund, it was started in 2009. It's called the 1MDB. And this 1MDB, investigations into 12 countries have since revealed that its funds have been embezzled by officials and their associates, given away in part by their suddenly lavish lifestyle. So the only reason people knew this stuff was missing is because somebody from Vegas basically picked up the phone and said, like, hey, this guy just spent $1.75 million. We don't even know who he is. And like, he just blew it in 90 minutes. And so that's how at least $4.5 billion have been embezzled from this sovereign wealth fund that was supposed to be built towards Malaysia. From 2009 to 2015. They do not have the numbers after 2015 yet. However, the banks and different payment fund managers are looking into how far it went.
Do you think this has hurt Malaysia's ability to raise money?
Now, up until maybe like a month ago, maybe not. I don't know.
Well, now, yeah, nobody's giving them any money anymore.
$4.5 billion. Absolutely incredible. And
That's
also, too, by the way, like, again, this is also an American story. Like, a lot of that money ended up in the pockets of American celebrities, people that were willing to do stuff with this little guy. And listen, I'm not implying they're illegal or that they should, like, I'm not saying Emily Ratajkowski should be in jail for going to the Super Bowl with this guy. I'm just saying, like, when you think about where this money ended up that was supposed to go towards Malaysian infrastructure and like building up their economy and all these things, a lot of it ended up in America's wealthiest celebrities.
Well, yeah, and that's a question. So can they be charged? What could they be charged with? Because there's an aspect of receiving stolen goods. How does she?
Well, like the Miranda Kerr, she had to give the jewelry back.
Right. But with cash, how are you like, well, he didn't steal all of the cash. Like, he must have had a job before this. Yeah. How can they prove that this 25 grand he gave Leo was the stolen 25 grand and not an earned 25 grand?
I'm totally with you. And then it also goes deeper as well. There are ties with Goldman Sachs, having a relationship with them. Timothy Leisner, I believe. I always say his name wrong. So there's a tie-in there. There's also a tie-in with Bloomberg. There's also a tie-in with, there was one other one. Now I can't find it. But there were 3 different like American corporations like tied into this, banking corporations tied into this, that also in a roundabout way benefited from it. So it is pretty crazy.
But there are like 4.5 billion people who didn't benefit from it, and those are the people who lost their money.
Yes. So it'll be interesting. Malaysia's Ministry of Finance says that the 1MDB, which is the fund that they had started, it remains in $7.6 billion in debt as of June of last year.
And they're going to have a tough time paying that one off.
I don't know how you pay it off.
They can't.
They can't.
Never.
It's an absolute
Malaysia may go up for like sheriff sale, and some other country can come in and buy Malaysia.
I mean, that's China's model. They like, if you look through Africa and other parts of Asia and around the world, China's model is they offer them things that they know the countries will not be able to pay back. And then they come in and say, like, this is ours now. They did it with railroad systems in Africa. They've done it with transit in Southeast Asia. Like, this is how they get countries indebted to them and essentially, I want to say take them over, but they essentially
did not know that.
They financially own
Where'd you learn that?
Well, I was listening to Jason Fitzgerald when he came on our show the one day. I also, this is so random. So we went to...
I like how you just threw that in, and I don't listen to Jason. But
I'm just saying, he talked about this a little bit. I knew that this is so random. We were at a bar in the Lehigh Valley. I went to that high school basketball game that LeBron James's son played in. Do you remember when I went down to see that?
Yes.
The facility, the PPL Center in Lehigh Valley, there is like food things. So there's like a Chicky and Pete's. There's like all these. We went in and we were eating and having drinks afterwards, and we met a girl who was from South Africa.
Okay.
And so she had been in the States now. She's gone back and forth for like a handful of years. And so we were just kind of poking and prodding her, just kind of like, because she had lived in different sections.
Okay, let me just cut you off right here. You don't ever say we were in a bar, we met a girl, and we were poking and prodding.
But see, that's only you because you have a sick, twisted mind.
That's what everybody ran to.
No,
everybody did.
That's the gray-haired 50-year-old mindset.
You may continue.
Disagree. The younger generation.
The younger people, it just went right over their head.
We mentally poke and prod.
Yeah, because that's what the younger generation does.
Do you want to hear about Africa or not?
Do.
It doesn't matter. So anyway, I don't have a lot to say about it, other than I was asking her, and she said, yeah, she goes, essentially what happens is they come in, they offer these contracts to these African nations, they make it a low payment up front, and they go, we'll build this infrastructure for you. And they'll come in and they'll say, we're going to build a hospital, or we're going to build these roads, or we're going to make this train, or you're going to be able to ship this and do that. And essentially what happens is China knows they're never going to be able to make the annual payment on it. There's no chance. And then they default, and China comes in and says, this is ours now.
Did this chick sound British?
A little bit. I mean, she definitely sounded South African. And not like, I personally think you can tell the difference between South African and British. That's my opinion.
But when you started talking to her, you could tell she wasn't from here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't make it like, it's not like the first thing I was listening for. If she wouldn't have told me she was from South Africa, I wouldn't have been like, you're from South Africa. But I clearly knew that she had spent time outside of the States.
Okay.
Did I think that she like was born and raised like in South Africa and then lived around the continent? No, I wouldn't have made that assumption about her.
Okay.
Yeah. So interesting.
I'm good.
So that's how China does it. So again, the Asian Great Gatsby. If you're interested in it, you can find the story. Joe Low, JHOLOW. It's a much longer story. There's a lot of unique details, but those were some of the highlights for you.
Okay. Speaking of highlights today, Ohio State is up 23-18 at halftime in a game that has obviously thrown basketball back into the 50s. And I mean the 1950s, not the scores in the 50s. Okay. You got anything you're looking for today in March Madness?
You and I have talked about it. Kevin Anderson plays at the St. John Newman grad from Williamsport. He plays. Delaware's going to play Nova this afternoon.
It's in the afternoon, yes. You like Auburn.
So obviously that's interesting.
You're an Auburn
I
guy.
think Auburn is really, and obviously they're a 2 seed, so I'm not saying anything that the world doesn't know. I'm a big Kessler fan. I think their guard plays okay. I think defensively, they just can do a lot of things that other teams can't do as far as switching and defense. Kessler can guard 1 through 5, and the dude's like 7'2". And I mean, he can switch on to guards. So defensively, whatever like we saw for anybody who watched the games last night, we saw some of these lower seeds just execute the crap out of these blue bloods and these higher seeds. St. Peter's ran the flex, and it looked like they looked like basketball savants because they just were so precise with what they did. Auburn, because of the way they switch, and I think the same thing about Gonzaga, but Auburn, because of the way they switch everything, it kind of negates all of those actions. Because like you do these little screens and these splits and these spacing, and Auburn just goes, all right, well, we're just going to switch it and none of it. And it won't kill us to switch this stuff. So that's my hot take on Auburn. That's why I'm so high on them.
And you've said throughout we keep calling them the blue bloods, the historic. I mean, Indiana's already out, Kentucky's already out, Kansas won big, but last year we had who was in the Final Four? Texas Tech.
Texas Tech was in
UCLA was back for the first time, but Gonzaga was there, Baylor was there. It's going to be a hodgepodge of teams again. It's not going to be the Duke and Carolina and Kansas and Michigan State. I mean, those days are gone.
I have Gonzaga winning it, and they're a 1, so like I'm not. But everyone else I have in it, I think, is a 3 or higher. And again, it's all right. You're rolling the dice. I'm not implying
you have to have one good game.
Yes, but it is like I think there's this idea that. Like I'm a Carolina fan. I grew up a Carolina fan. I know like Carolina's in a little bit of trouble as far as being like this national title contender year after year. Like the system has shifted. There's such an advantage if you can keep a group together for 3 or 4 years and really like compete at a high level. It's a huge advantage. And the other thing too, like some of these recruits, because of the advertising money and the marketing money and all this stuff, some of these recruits like they don't need to go to a top 5 program anymore. Like when John Wall and some of those guys were going to Kentucky in like the middle like 2010s, like you kind of went to Kentucky because it was a good way to get your brand going and to get your endorsements and rolling and everything else. So when you did leave Kentucky, you were kind of set up. Like now, like you can stay home and you can
go anywhere.
You can truly go wherever you want to live on the beach, go to a school on the beach. You want to live in the Midwest, go to a school. You don't have to do these blue blood universities anymore. Yeah, so it's flipped.
I just had to check. I didn't know if UCLA came back to win last night because they were struggling.
They did, yeah.
They pulled it out, but yeah, it was tough. And one of the crazy things from history, I remember when UCLA won years ago with Tyus Edney, they almost lost in the second round in Missouri, and Edney went, or was it Cameron Dollar? I think it was Tyus Edney. That he kind of went end to end and threw in like an 8-foot runner to beat Missouri by a point in the second round, and then they go on. One of the years. I don't think it was the year Maryland won the national title. I think it was the year before when they went to the Final Four. In the first round, they were losing to George Washington with a minute to go. And then Steve Blake hit a 3-pointer, and so you can't like one game to the next. You just can't carry it over. Like Carolina just looked like the greatest team in the world yesterday.
Sure.
They might lose by 10 tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you can't run through like, oh, this team stunk. And they were lucky. Their luck's going to run out because it just comes and goes.
I'm curious, like if you had takeaways from yesterday, but like one of my biggest takeaways was just there were a handful of teams that knew who they were and they knew what they were trying to do. And this is our system. And like when we're down 3 with 5 minutes to go, we are running this. And like if we're up 3 with a minute to go, we are running this. I thought New Mexico State was that way. Like they just knew what they were doing every moment. And I think those are the teams that, and now like in the NCAA now, those teams can beat these blue bloods because the blue bloods are so inexperienced. They're so young. And so you watch teams like St. Peter's and you watch them run the flex and it's just like, it's so precise and it works because they know who they are and what they're doing.
The thing that shocks me, and I know this rivets everyone that's not a basketball fan, how many teams down the stretch in crunch time just stop playing offense and they give the ball to their best player and their best player never gives it up and he ends up throwing up a 17-foot contested jump shot because they've just, especially teams if they've got a little bit of a lead and they want to run the shot clock down, that they don't do anything until 10 and then they try to get a shot and then they end up with a bad shot at 3. It's just shocking to me when you watch them play for 37 minutes, and then at the very end, when everything's on the line, there's just no movement, no ball movement, no player movement. Everything stops.
I think not not to be too nerdy about it. I think, and you and I've talked a lot about this. There is a lot of higher level basketball programs, they have a philosophy and they have a system. And the regular season, like they'll make adjustments, like they'll scout here or there, but it's all within that philosophy. And the other teams are doing the same thing. So if you're playing Syracuse, they are playing a 2-3 zone,
Right.
and they are doing. If you're playing North Carolina, like they are going to run their semi-transition, and they're they're going to do these principles. And what happens is once you leave the conference tournament and you come in and you play a St. Peter's, a New Mexico State, they don't care about your philosophy. They almost abandon theirs, and they just do the thing that they believe is going to work. Like we might not be a matchup zone team, but St. Peter's played matchup zone against Kentucky. Right. And so all of a sudden, if you're Kentucky, you go through this season of like, here's 28 games where it's just, what's the other team's philosophy? This is what we'll do against it based off of ours. And then all of a sudden, here comes St. Peter's, and they show up in a matchup zone, right? And all of a sudden, it's kind of like, well, like we haven't done this.
Now
like,
what do we do?
Like, what do we do? And here's the other thing too. It's not like you got a 22-year-old looking over at Coach Cal going, what do we do? It's a 19-year-old looking over at Coach Cal who really is kind of like, well, I don't even know what to do with this.
Right.
So it's just, I think the challenge for those higher teams, those higher seeds, is it's not fairly exposed. Like people don't actually talk about how difficult it is for those higher seeds to win those games.
I think the neat thing about March Madness too is it clearly shows the best player on these mid-majors. Mm-hmm. The best player at New Mexico State could have played easily in the SEC and easily in the Big Ten. And maybe the fourth and fifth best player on a Big Ten team is better than the fourth and fifth best, but the stud could have played at a bigger level. Yep. And they either got under-recruited or they developed late or they didn't get or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I think a lot of it shows how fragile and difficult recruiting is. Yeah, I think there's this concept, like I was saying to you, like when Duke had the top 3 recruits a couple of years ago when they had Zion Williamson, RJ Barron, and those guys. And like, don't get me wrong, like I'm not saying they weren't the 3 best players in the country, but I think like you kind of forget that what is the difference between player 3 and player 30? Is player 90 going to grow physically?
Well, yeah, and how do you tell when they're 17?
You just right. And so it's we use some of the stuff and we say like, well, they had to do that. And it's like, yeah, but there's so much, it's hard. It's really, really difficult to like really gauge how these 17 and 18-year-olds are what they're gonna do and what's gonna happen.
Oh, and you can watch, being a high school coach, you can have kids in your program for 3 years and their improvement or lack of development, like between their junior and senior year, that you were thrown off by it. And this is a kid you see every day, all the time.
Sure.
When you're scouting and you're recruiting and you're looking at video and you're looking a kid that you don't even know, and now you're going to try to project how big is he, how good, like what's in his head, what's in his heart, where does he want, where is he going to be 3 years from now? It is much more of a crapshoot than people think.
I wrote down 2 things here before we end the show. I think Coach Cal, and I know people don't like Coach Cal. Did you see his post-game interview at all?
I did not.
He took almost all of the blame. And here's the funny part. I don't know if it was really his fault. Like, I think he had I think he has young kids that I think like froze up. A lot of them didn't want to be the one to shoot the ball. Like it was. And so I think sometimes like these coaches, they get praise for things that, I'm like, I don't think they should be treated the way they get treated.
Right.
However, I also think there's times where like Coach Cal gets thrown under the bus and the dude gets on the mic and he's like, listen, like I could have called timeouts differently. Like he almost said nothing negative about his kids or players after what just happened.
I'm not a John Calipari fan because I think he cheated all over the place when he was,
like everybody
30 years ago. But you're right. And I've said this before. I've said this to Chris Massey, and I have no rational explanation for it. If John Calipari jumped in a pool, and if Rick Pitino jumped in a pool, there would be rings of grease that just floated away from them because those are the kind of coaches they are. But I love Pitino, and I always have, and I don't like Calipari. And it makes no rational sense. Why we root for who we root for, I don't know. I saw an interview with Calipari years ago, and I don't remember. It may have been when he was at Memphis. I don't remember where he was. But they were at the Final Four, and he said there's a goal, blah, blah, blah. I've told our team, our goal is we're going to have more fun than any team at the Final Four.
Sure.
And, I know who it was. Didn't they lose? Ramil Robinson.
Okay.
Didn't he beat?
Maybe.
I think they lost at the buzzer.
Okay.
But anyway, that was his. I've told people, and I still don't root for him, and I won't root for him again. And I laughed yesterday when Kentucky lost.
Okay.
I would go to Wild Wings and sit and watch games with Calipari all day, and I'll bet he would be the greatest guy in the world.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I agree that all the cheating that he did, maybe not all the cheating, but the cheating that he did is rampant.
Yeah. And then
he got scapegoated.
I don't disagree with that. I think and then the other thing, and I don't know how you fix this, and I understand why they do it, because it's an easy narrative and it just sounds good. It sells papers. Like, I get it.
Nobody buys papers anymore.
That's true. It gets clicks.
There you go. We go.
I just don't know how you solve it. I don't understand why they have to make these coaches out to be demigods. Like, I don't. And so, like, even I think, like, the coach for St. Peter's, Shanine Holloway, I'm sure it's an incredible story. Like, I told you before, I think I saw him play in the USBL in Whitehall, Pennsylvania for the Pennsylvania Valley Dogs one time.
Who didn't play for the Penn?
There you go.
How many people have seen a Pennsylvania Valley Dogs game besides you?
I might be the only one. So it's an incredible story. And I'm not saying he's not. I'm sure he's a phenomenal person, all these things. But it's like, you have a group of kids that are about to beat Kentucky, and every 10 seconds, they're just showing Holloway. And I'm thinking to myself, like, just show the kids. Like, just show the dudes that are about to knock off one of the most historic programs in the history of time. Like, if you show me the coach a handful of times, I get it. But it was like every single dead ball, Shanine Holloway. And I'm like, it just, you don't need to do it. He's very important. He's a great coach. He's a great person. But, like, there are dudes out there literally sacrificing their physical safety, trying to beat, like, Oscar Shibway and, like, Kentucky. And they're not even, like, zooming in on them or showing them or, like, talking about their, like, history or anything. They just, college basketball has a coaching demigod problem. And I don't know how to fix it.
Well, football does too.
Okay.
College sports. You've said it here, just talking about basketball, but it goes to all sports. Most coaches have trouble accepting the fact that they only have so much control.
Sure.
And that the kids or the adults, depending on what level you're at, have way, way more of an impact on the game than the coaches do.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, like, I sat here and I said, like, they executed to a T and all this stuff. But realistically, like, if the shooting guard misses a couple of shots, like, we're not even talking about Shanine Holloway. Like, it's not even a thing.
Who was the team? Who beat Iowa? It was early in the afternoon. We had
Richmond.
Yeah, is that the kid that started out 7 for 8? Somebody had a ridiculous game for this. Somebody was 4 for 5 at halftime.
Okay. Where are you going with it?
But yeah, just like that.
Like, we can't think of his name.
But not even that. But, somebody won yesterday because one of the players was 7 for 8 from, no coach. The coach had nothing to do with that. They can do shooting drills. He can do teaching drills. But, and somebody today is going to lose because their best shooter went 3 for 16.
Sure.
And the coach had nothing to do with that either.
Doesn't mean that they're any better or worse of a coach.
Nope.
My biggest thing is, like I said, I can't tell you the name of the shooting guard for St. Peter's. I can't tell you the name of the kid for Bellefonte you just mentioned. But the TV shoved Shanine Holloway down my throat the entire time. And listen, it's not like, I don't mean to pick on him. Every game did the same thing. I can tell you more of the coaches' names after yesterday. Coaches I've never seen before in my life. And I can tell you their names, but I can't tell you the names of the kid who's out there, like, actually winning the game.
Did I tell you? I can't remember names either, but shoes. Did the point guard for St. Peter's have green shoes? Or red shoes? They had very bright shoes.
Okay.
And as it got closer and closer to the end, my mother was now apologizing to him because earlier in the game, she was telling him that he was making too many stupid plays and he needed to pass the ball more. And every time he tried to do something, it was a turnover. And then at the end, he's at the foul line. It's like, well, he does have 25 points and he's 8 assists. And she was like, yeah, I guess he has done a lot better than I thought. So to some dude from St. Peter's, my mom apologizes for her early game criticism that turned into late game praise.
That's pretty great. Do you want to apologize?
For what?
To Chet Holmgren.
They beat Georgia State.
Yeah, but do you want to apologize to him?
Well, we had a long conversation off the air. It was off the air, wasn't it? I'm intrigued to watch them through. Congratulations to Gonzaga. You beat a 16 seed. This is again my irrationalness because I'm sure Gonzaga is a great place. I'm sure Mark Few's a great coach and they've done an unbelievable thing. And when I was a kid, you would have never guessed that a school like Gonzaga could be a national basketball power. But my one goal for the tournament is for them to lose so I can laugh again. Just like for all these years, you won't know this because you were too young. The best thing about the NHL is you could chant 1940 because the New York Rangers hadn't won a title since 1940. Then they won in 1994 and it's kind of ruined it. Every year people tell me how good Gonzaga is. Every year I tell you they're not going to win a national championship. And next year, come this time, I'm going to tell you they're still not going to win a national championship. And they're going to lose again.
What I would say to you is congratulations for being right about something that Gonzaga has like a 0.03%.
They're a 1 seed every year. Okay. They're ranked number 1 every year.
What I'm saying to you, though, is when you say that, you're essentially like you have a mathematically, even when they're a 1 seed, even when they're the best team in the tournament, mathematically, you have like an 88% chance of being right. So congratulations for saying something every year that you have an astronomically good chance of being right.
There has been no more consistently high-rated program in the last 20 years that has never won a title than Gonzaga men's basketball.
Well, I mean, I disagree with that. I mean, 20 years ago, they were sneaking in as like a 12 seed and they were exciting and it was like, watch them knock off whoever. So I don't know about 20 years.
I remember one year, I think they were like top 5 in the country and they got a 6 seed and people were beside themselves.
Sure.
And they're like, the committee doesn't think they're any good.
Yeah.
And they didn't win again. And then they're like, well, they're getting unfairly punished because they don't get the high seeds that they deserve. And now they get the high seeds that they deserve. And now they get unfairly punished by Baylor, who beat them by 70.
I'm happy that you feel good about taking a chance on an 88% certainty.
I feel good. I feel very good about it. And when they were tied with Georgia State yesterday in the second half, I felt great.
Everyone else, Kentucky lost, Gonzaga won. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to Weis Markets. Be sure to
I got one more thing to mention
for all your local news.
Nobody's listening anymore. I realize that. And I'm going to go from basketball to wrestling. The Montoursville, Gavin Hoffman is in the national semifinal. Not semis, sorry, quarters.
National or state?
National. He's at Ohio State. He's a 197-pounder. And I don't know what seed. He's upset a couple people on his way through, but he's still going strong. And he goes today. And he might be going now or he might have just gone.
Okay.
So you can Google that. Gavin Hoffman, 197-pounder out of Ohio State, who's made a really, really good run here.
Awesome.
There you go.
Good stuff.
And I remember to say it.
Yeah, crushed it. Mark seems to have issues with everywhere I went to school, like coming in Gonzaga. There you go.
We know someone who went to Gonzaga? Nobody likes Gonzaga. No, I like Gonzaga. I just think it's funny.
People like the Zags.
I think it's funny. If you can hate Duke, and I don't even hate Gonzaga. I don't mind it. As a matter of fact,
sign us off the show.
During the regular season, I'll root for them to be a number 1 seed, and then they can lose again because it's more fun when they lose as a 1. That's it. I'll see you. Go. Who's losing to Ohio State right now? That's who I'm rooting for today. Loyola Chicago. Sister
Jean?
102, I think so.
It's Sister Jean, 102 years old.
She's watching right now. Go root for Sister Jean.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Jeff Ever. He's Mark Messina. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you on Monday.
See ya.